I guess just to get things started here, the main mandate of you guys is to promote Hong Kong as a travel destination. So I want to ask you straight up, what changes are you aware of that we should be expecting, definitely coming as far as international tourism is concerned?
I think as far as Hong Kong is concerned, we've relied on tourism very much, in our economy. And, a big number, more than 6% of our labor population is relied on directly or indirectly on the tourism income. In a normal good year, every day, Hong Kong, a city of 7.5 million, we receive over 200,000 visitors a day, and that is 200,000 a day. But at the moment, because of all the lockdown and everything, we are only receiving about 300 a day. So you can imagine the kind of impact that has on our tourism sector, not to mention the other things.
Right. So what changes are we expecting now? So, the big news this week was, and incrementally we got more information on it, this travel bubble with Singapore. I'm wondering if you know any more information, when we can expect that and other, hopefully, initiatives that would open up the sector further.
We're very pleased to hear the news that both sides, the government, the Singaporean government and Hong Kong government, have reached in principle this agreement. I think it is a milestone. It is a very significant for the two sides to arrange that, because for air travel bubble, that is a term that we've been hearing for quite a few months, since I think March, April. First, we started hearing certain countries are doing that travel bubble in Europe or in Australia, between Australia and New Zealand. But actually, if you have really looked into it, no real air travel bubble has been established. What we have seen so far is certain air corridors or green lanes that still requires quarantine. And this one, if we can implement it properly, this arrangement or air travel bubble arrangement will be the first that is quarantine-free. I think that is very, very significant. Now, of course,
Dane, do we have a timeline? Do we have a timeline on the Hong Kong-Singapore travel bubble?
My understanding is that the government is working on both governments are working on the details in the next couple of weeks. So, we could. I hope that optimistically we can look at, say, December, that we can, start operating that.
Okay, and of course, it's mainland visitors who've been the key drivers of the tourism industry in Hong Kong over the last few years. Do you have any sense, any clarity in your discussions with officials in Hong Kong as to when there may be a full easing of travel restrictions between the mainland and Hong Kong?
I think there'll be still quite some time, from reopening the border with the mainland. By the way, what we can see is that the whole mainland China has been controlling and containing the virus very, very well. And we're talking about a vast country with a huge population. So any opening up, to them, would be a big risk. So far what we can see that is Macau, our neighboring city, is also just opened in the last 2 months to the mainland. But that was done after 150 days almost of zero local infectious cases. Now, for Hong Kong, we only very luckily in the last week or 2 weeks that we have seen these numbers coming down to one single digit. So I think it would be quite a while before we can see that border reopening, unless maybe for a very limited basis on the essential. But any wider opening, I think it will take some time.
Okay, to what extent is the push around trying to stimulate domestic tourism offsetting some of the losses that you're seeing from the lack of international tourism?
I think back in April, May, that we can see that this pandemic, at that time, is still a local, regional epidemic becoming a pandemic. Then we can see that it's not anything like SARS back in the 2003. So it's going to take us some time. So at that time, the Hong Kong Tourism Board, we started to promote local tourism and what we called holiday at home, to encourage Hong Kong residents to go out to to spend, to boost the consumption, to rediscover the hidden gems in Hong Kong. The Hong Kong people are, I think, one of the most seasoned travelers in the world. And every long weekend, there'll be hundreds and thousands of people flying away from Hong Kong to the regional destinations. So this is the time that we can only help ourselves by showcasing to the world that we are on. Although visitors cannot come in, we cannot go out, but still within Hong Kong, things are not 100% locked down, and we can still enjoy our city. So that's the plan that has been doing quite successfully. But of course, I mean that we can also see that right. Given the sort of third burst. And so we kind of paused it a bit. But yesterday, the government also announced a relaxation in the social distancing, allowing local tours up to 30 people, in a group. But of course, they have to observe very stringent right. Hygiene measures and protocols.
Yeah, Dane, I think even before they raised that, there are certain parts of Hong Kong where you would see more than 30 people. But that's for a different conversation. Here's my final question for you, Dane. Currently, when you arrive at the airport, people have to wait there. The very, very few people that come to Hong Kong have to wait there an extremely long amount of time to wait for testing. Now, that goes into the question of what replaces quarantine. Is there a plan to speed up getting those tested, those negative results for people to come out then of the airport and enjoy this travel bubble? And what are you guys doing to promote the concept and perception that Hong Kong is a safe and healthy place, really, to go about?
I think that's the most important issues for any travelers, whether they're on essential business travel or leisure travel. Now, the confidence, I think what we have, our surveys around the world, it basically shows that everyone wants to get out, everyone wants to travel. But however, the confidence level, do they feel safe to travel? So this particular arrangement of air travel bubble with Singapore, the reason why I said it's milestone and its significance, because it's going to test through all the kinds of measures that would be in place and how we could improve them. The current sort of testing, the important part is that not upon arrival in a destination, but also for returning, that you feel that your fellow residents and your friends, when they come back from a certain country, that they're safe, that they're not going to spread locally if they got infected. So that test is essential. Now, the question is that these tests, these very high accuracy tests of PCR requires laboratory testing and processing, and you have to wait for, I heard people waiting for at least 8 hours, some even up to 12 hours at the airport. Now, this is something we're not going to take away for the time being, my understanding. But the government is also testing a rapid test. So before taking the plane or upon arrival, there will be a rapid test. But the rapid test, the question at the moment, my understanding is that the accuracy is not high enough. So I think there's plan that could we do two. So upon arrival or returning, do a rapid test. So if it's okay, of course, you still undergo that longer test of PCR test. Then you can free to go and wait at home, sort of for a couple of hours. Then if there's a problem, then you'll be called back. So I think there's a compromise there. But however, the important thing is that let's start going a small step, see how we can improve it. There are a lot of concerns about these quarantine tests. 3 times, 4 times for a trip is going to cost quite a lot of money. We're talking about $200-300 US. But I think when things started to go well, and there'll be more people accepting to that, I think the price and cost will all come down.
Dane, I know you were
Yes.
with Cathay Pacific for a very long time, and I'm sure you've already seen the news on the airline. I was wondering if, what were your initial thoughts when you heard about these restructuring, and how does that affect, it is Hong Kong's airline, how does that affect then plans of Hong Kong, if at all, moving forward?
Cathay Pacific is not only the home carrier of Hong Kong, but it's also the home carrier for this region, for Asia. It's a brand name that Hong Kong people and Asian be very proud of. It's very sad that we see this happening. But you look around in the world, this pandemic is something that nobody can control, and a lot of the global mega carriers, Lufthansa, British Airways, American carriers, they're all under significant pressure. But one thing I think, for Cathay Pacific, it is not a state-owned airline. It's not receiving, state or government sort of aid. But of course, they have been giving loans by the government. But it's now a matter of survival and existence. So I feel very sad, to see my colleagues and old colleagues, having to sort of leave the company. But I hope that, with this, they can at least survive until such time that they can come back, to make Hong Kong and to make Asia sort of, recovering again. Yes.